Taiwan and the Ghost Fleet. Part 1. Long before clocks learned how to count seconds, before maps decided where the edges of the world should be, there was an island floating quietly between the breaths of the sea. The island was called Taiwan, though in those days names were not fixed things. Names drifted like mist and settled only when spoken with care. Taiwan rose each morning wrapped in cloud, her mountains stretching like the backs of sleeping dragons. Forests covered her slopes, deep and patient, trees whispering stories older than memory. Rivers slid gently from the high places to the sea, carrying moonlight in their currents even during the day. At night, the ocean rocked the island as a mother rocks a child, waves repeating the same soft lesson again and again. Nothing must hurry. Everything arrives. On the eastern shore lived a village where the people believed the land could hear them. They spoke softly, not out of fear, but out of respect. When they walked, they felt the ground answer back, a subtle warmth through bare feet, a quiet acknowledgement. Among them lived a child named Lin, whose dreams were deeper than most. When Lin slept, the island leaned closer. Every night, Lin dreamed the same dream. In it, Taiwan was not land but a living being, a vast, breathing presence. Mountains rose and fell with slow inhalations. The forest hummed like a lullaby sung too low to be words. The sea shimmered with the steady rhythm of a heart at rest. In the dream, Taiwan spoke, not with a voice but with feeling. "Listen," she seemed to say, "I will tell you how to stay whole." Lin would wake just before dawn, the air still cool, the world half-formed. Sometimes there were tears on Lin's cheeks without sadness. Sometimes there was joy without reason. Always, there was a sense of having been held. One morning, mist covered everything so completely that the village seemed to float in nothingness. The elders said it was a listening fog, the kind that came when the island wanted to hear something important. Lin stepped outside and felt it immediately, a gentle pull, not forward, not back, downward, into the earth itself. Without fear, Lin followed, past bamboo groves that swayed without wind, past stones worn smooth by centuries of waiting, past a river that paused its sound as Lin crossed. At the foot of the mountain, there was a door, not built, not carved, simply there. It opened when Lin placed a hand upon it, warm as skin, steady as breath. Inside was darkness, but not empty darkness, the kind filled with presence, like the pause between two heartbeats. And in that pause, Taiwan began to tell her story. The darkness did not frighten Lin. It wrapped around them like night wraps around the sea, familiar, endless, kind. From somewhere deep, a glow appeared. Not light exactly, but awareness. Taiwan remembered her beginning. She remembered fire beneath water, stone pushing upward, slow and determined, rain cooling what fire had shaped. She remembered learning patience from the mountains, flexibility from the rivers, resilience from the sea that never stopped returning. I learned to bend, the island conveyed, so I would not break. Lin felt these memories as sensations rather than images. The pressure of earth, the release of rain, the long exhale of time itself. Then came other memories, footsteps, first light ones, bare feet, people who listened, They arrived not to conquer, but to belong. They learned the rhythms of the land. When the typhoons would sing, when the earth would tremble, when the forest needed silence instead of voices. Taiwan held them gently, and in return they held her with care. But time, like the tide, never stays still. More footsteps came, heavier, louder, impatient. The island felt confusion, then pain, not sharp pain, but the deep ache of being misunderstood. Still she endured. She always endured. I learned endurance from the ocean. She shared. The waves taught me that persistence does not need anger. Lynn's chest rose and fell in time with that ancient truth. Outside, dawn was breaking. Inside, time had loosened its grip. Taiwan was not finished speaking. Not yet. She never was. The glow dimmed slightly, like a candle being watched rather than blown out. Lynn felt the door behind them, still open, still waiting. The island released one final feeling before letting the moment rest. A story told slowly can last forever. Lynn stepped back into the morning mist, carrying the weightless heaviness of having heard something sacred. The village looked the same, but nothing was the same. And that night, when Lynn slept, the island leaned in once more. Edie to continue. Part 2. That night, sleep came to Lynn like a slow tide. Not all at once, not suddenly, but inch by inch, until waking loosened its grip and drifted away. The island waited for this moment. Taiwan always waited. In the dream, Lynn stood again at the edge of the sea, but the water was different now. It did not move forward or back. It breathed. Each wave rose gently, paused, and settled as if practicing calm. The moon hung low, larger than it should be, its reflection trembling softly on the surface. Walk, the island suggested, not as a command, but as an invitation. Lynn stepped onto the water. It held, not because the sea had hardened, but because it trusted. With every step, memories surfaced beneath Lynn's feet, not images, but feelings left behind by time. Laughter carried by salt air, lanterns floating upward, unsure if they were stars or wishes, hands planting rice, pressing hope into wet earth. Taiwan shared these moments without words. She remembered centuries not as dates, but as moods. There was the era of curiosity, when new sounds arrived on unfamiliar winds. The era of learning, when languages overlapped like waves crossing paths. The era of silence, when speaking too loudly felt dangerous. Through it all, the island learned a quiet skill, how to hold many selves at once. I am not one story, Taiwan conveyed gently. I am many stories resting together. Lynn felt the truth of this settle into the body, like warmth spreading from the chest outward. Farther out on the sea, shapes appeared, ships, but softened by dreamlight. They did not crash or conquer. They passed, leaving ripples rather than scars. The moonlight deepened. Now the mountains rose from the water itself, impossibly tall, their peaks wrapped in cloud. Lynn climbed without effort, as if gravity had chosen kindness. At the summit, Taiwan waited, not as land, not as voice, but as presence. Here, the air was thin and pure. Each breath felt deliberate. This is where I learned balance. The island shared. between strength and gentleness, between remembering and letting go. Lynn sat, legs folded, and listened. Below, forests whispered in layers. Not one sound, but many: leaves, insects, wind. Rain remembered rather than falling. The island had learned something else too, that stillness was not emptiness. Stillness was preparation. In the quiet, Taiwan had learned how to endure storms without becoming one, how to absorb pain without passing it on, how to remain open even after being hurt. Lynn felt a soft ache behind the eyes, not sadness, not joy, but recognition. I carry it all, the island conveyed. So those who live upon me do not have to carry it alone. The dream slowed, the moon dimmed, the sea exhaled, the mountains rested. Lynn laid down at the summit, using the earth itself as a pillow. For a long while, nothing happened, and then Taiwan did something rare. She rested too. Morning arrived quietly. No dramatic sunrise, no announcement, just light finding its way in. Lynn woke with the feeling of having slept far longer than a single night, though the village rooster said otherwise. Something lingered, though, a steadiness, a sense of being anchored. The elders noticed it immediately. That day, the sea was calm, so calm it looked unfinished. That evening, a storm gathered far out on the horizon, thunder rolling like a distant drum. The villagers prepared, as they always did. Lynn watched the clouds and felt no fear. Somewhere deep beneath the ground, Taiwan was already listening, measuring the storm, deciding how much to take, how much to release. As night fell, rain began to tap softly, then more firmly, then with full commitment. The island held, and as Lynn drifted back into sleep, Taiwan leaned close again, not to teach this time, but simply to be near. The story continued, unhurried, as at Alwa, Y.S. Wood. Part 3. The storm passed away. All storms eventually do. Not defeated, not erased, but understood. Rain washed the leaves clean. Rivers grew fuller, then calmer. The island breathed out. Taiwan remembered many storms like this one. Not only those born of cloud and wind, but others, made of people, ambition, fear, and time. That night, Lynn dreamed deeper than before. This time, the dream did not begin in nature, but in movement. Footsteps again. Many more now. The island showed Lynn how she had become a crossing point, not just of seas, but of histories. Sailors arrived following stars. Merchants followed opportunity. Empires followed hunger. Each came believing they had found something new. But Taiwan had already been old for a very long time. They called me Formosa once, the island recalled softly, because beauty was the only word they had when they first looked. Lynn saw it. Lush forests reaching the shore, mountains rising sharply from the sea, rivers flashing silver in the sun. An island that looked impossible to own. Then came borders drawn too quickly. Flags changed. Languages layered themselves over one another like sediment. The island did not resist. She absorbed. I learned to survive by remembering who I was beneath what was placed upon me. Lynn felt centuries pass like slow waves. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Cities learned to glow at night. Railways stitched the land together. Temples stood beside factories. Old rituals continued quietly while new lives hurried past them. Taiwan showed Lin narrow streets filled with steam and voices, night markets alive with color and scent. Food cooked not just to fill hunger, but to preserve memory. When words were taken, the island conveyed. Taste remained. Lin understood. Culture did not always shout. Sometimes it simmered. The dream shifted again. Now the air felt heavy, charged. The island remembered a time of pressure, when silence was enforced, when fear lingered in rooms long after people had left them. Lin felt it in the chest, the holding in a breath. I learned patience then, Taiwan shared, and the courage of quiet people, people who remembered in whispers, who passed stories in kitchens, who had hope inside ordinary days. Time moved. The pressure eased, slowly, unevenly. Voices returned, cautious at first, then steadier. The island felt herself becoming something rare, a place learning how to choose its own voice. Identity is not given, Taiwan told Lin. It is grown. The dream widened. Lin saw modern Taiwan now. Glass towers reflecting mountains, scooters flowing like schools of fish, screens glowing late into the night, a place balancing speed and soul. Not perfect, not finished, but awake. I am still becoming, the island said, and I am allowed to. Lin felt something settle, a deep comfort in that unfinishedness. At the edge of the dream, dawn waited again. Before waking, Taiwan offered one more feeling, gentle and steady. History does not end. It rests between breaths. Lin woke as the sun rose over the mountains. The village stirred. Life continued. But Lin carried the island's long memory now, not as weight, but as grounding. And that night, and the night after that, and many nights beyond, Taiwan kept telling her story, not in a straight line, but like the sea, returning. Part 4. That night, the dream did not arrive gently. It came like a low vibration, distant, steady, impossible to ignore. Lin stood once more upon the island, but this time Taiwan felt alert, not afraid. Alert. The sea was calm, yet beneath it something moved, not waves, but tension, like a hell breast stretching across the water. To the west, far beyond where sight usually ended, there was a presence, not a face, not a shape, a weight. Taiwan acknowledged it without turning away. Some mountains are not made of stone, the island conveyed. Some shadows do not need to touch you to be felt. Lin understood. Across the water, another vast land watched, ancient, immense, convinced of its own gravity. Its gaze was not new. It had lingered for generations. It believes I belong to it, Taiwan said quietly, as if time were ownership. Memories surface, not sudden but deliberate. The island remembered being spoken for, being named by others, being told who she was allowed to be. Each time she listened, each time she waited. I learned early that survival does not always mean confrontation, Taiwan shared. Sometimes it means clarity. Lin felt the island's spine, the mountains steady and unmoving. Pressure increased. Voices rose across the water, loud, certain, repeating themselves until repetition tried to pass for truth. The sea between them tightened, currents shifting uneasily. The people on Taiwan felt it too. In the dream, Lin saw ordinary days layered with quiet vigilance. Children walking to school beneath clear skies. Shops opening as usual. Lanterns still lit at night. Life continued. Not because the threat was small, but because the will to live freely was larger. Fear wants attention, Taiwan murmured. I refuse to feed it. The island remembered times when the pressure grew louder, when aircraft shadows crossed the sky, when words like inevitable were spoken too casually by those far away. Still, Taiwan remained, not rigid, not loud, present. I do not need to shout my existence, she told Lin. I exist. Lin felt something powerful then, not anger, not defiance, but resolve shaped by patience. The island had learned something else over time, that democracy, like ecology, requires care, that freedom is not loud, but alive, that identity, once grown, cannot be erased by insistence. The presence across the water pressed closer in the dream. Taiwan did not retreat. She rooted herself deeper into memory, into people, into choice. I am not fragile because I am small, she conveyed. I am resilient because I am many, many voices, many cultures, many futures imagined at once. The sea responded, not with violence, but with space, widening slightly, asserting distance through depth rather than force. Lin felt the island's calm return, not as relief, but as decision. The dream softened. The pressure did not vanish. It never fully did, but became manageable, contained within awareness rather than fear. Before waking, Taiwan offered Lin one final truth, steady as breath. Threat does not define me. Response does. Morning came. The sun rose as it always had. Scooters would hum. Markets would open. Children would learn new words for old ideas. And beneath it all, the island continued to listen to the sea, to her people, to herself. Unbroken. The story does not rush. It does not resolve. It stays like Taiwan itself. And when sleep returns, so will the island. Part 5. The dream returned with restraint. The way something serious enters a room. No thunder. No raised voice. Only awareness. Lin stood on a high ridge this time, where Taiwan's mountains face west. The sea stretched wide below, calm on the surface, restless underneath. The presence across the water was still there, closer now, not in distance, but in insistence. Taiwan did not look away. History repeats itself when listening stops, the island conveyed. So I listened carefully. Lin felt the island's memory open again, deeper, more layered, long before the current tension. There had been other moments when Taiwan's future was spoken about without Taiwan in the room. Treaties signed elsewhere. Decisions made by hands that had never touched her soil. The island remembered being transferred like an object, being renamed, being discussed in abstractions. I was patient then, Taiwan shared. But patience is not the same as consent. The dream shifted to the 20th century. Lin felt weight, ideological, heavy, pressing. On the mainland, a vast transformation had taken place. Certainty hardened into doctrine. Unity became a demand rather than a choice. Across the sea, Taiwan absorbed those echoes, not with obedience, but with caution. We diverged quietly, the island said, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. The people on Taiwan built something fragile and remarkable. Not overnight, not without pain. Mistakes were made. Voices were silenced for a time. Fear took root before it was named. Taiwan remembered this without denial. I carry my own shadows, she told Lin. Acknowledging them is how I learned to stand upright. Then came change, gradual, contested, human. Walls softened. Voices returned. Choices reappeared. Democracy did not arrive as a celebration, but as a discipline. It required listening, compromise, memory. Freedom is work the island conveyed, and my people chose to do it. Across the water, the gaze hardened. Unity was demanded again, framed as destiny, as history, as inevitability. The word echoed in the dream, heavy and repetitive. Inevitable, inevitable, inevitable. Taiwan remained still. Nothing that erases choice is inevitable, she replied, not aloud but in posture. Lin saw it clearly now. The tension was not only military or political. It was philosophical. On one side, a belief that order must be enforced. On the other, a belief that identity must be chosen. The sea between them held this difference like a fault line. Jets crossed the sky in the dream, not attacking, only asserting presence. The island felt the vibrations pass through her air, through her bones. She did not flinch. I have learned the cost of being loud, Taiwan shared. So I practiced being steady. The people below continued living, not naively, but deliberately, voting, debating, disagreeing openly, teaching children that belonging does not require obedience. This is my quiet defiance, the island said. I continue. The pressure did not disappear. It circled. It tested. It waited. Taiwan waited too, not passively, but attentively. Before the dream loosened, the island gave Lin one more truth, firm and calm. History is not only what is claimed, it is what is lived. Lin woke just before dawn. The world outside was unchanged and entirely changed. The story continued, unresolved, awake, breathing, just like the island. The sea is still there. The listening continue. And so does the story. Part 6. This time, the dream began with silence, so complete it felt deliberate. No sea, no wind, no footsteps. Lin floated in a vast dark space, neither asleep nor awake, until a single sensation appeared. Weight, gentle but undeniable. Taiwan was gathering herself. When the world returned, it returned slowly. The island unfolded beneath Lin like a living map, not marked by borders or names, but by pulses of meaning. Here, a harbor where ships once waited, unsure which flag they would carry next. Here, a classroom where a language had been forbidden, then whispered, then reclaimed. Here, a square where people stood quietly, not to shout, but to be counted. History does not always move forward, Taiwan conveyed. Sometimes it circles, testing what has changed. The presence across the water shifted again. It no longer felt only like pressure. Now it carried impatience. The island sensed it clearly. The frustration controlled, delayed, the discomfort of ambiguity. Ambiguity frightens those who need certainty. Taiwan reflected. I have learned to live inside it. Lin felt the tension sharpen. Statements repeated, warnings issued. Exercise of a form not for use, but for display. Strength announcing itself. Taiwan did not mirror it. Instead, she remembered something older than the conflict. She remembered the strait itself, the body of water between her and the mainland. This sea is not a gap, she told Lin. It is a relationship. Currents crossed. Fish migrated. Storms passed without allegiance. For centuries, the water had connected as much as it separated. The tragedy is not distance. Taiwan continued. It is the refusal to accept difference. The dream shifted inward now, away from ships and skies into homes. Lin saw kitchens at night, lights low, conversations careful but honest, families discussing futures without knowing which version of tomorrow would arrive. Some spoke of fear, some of fatigue, some of resolve. None spoke of surrender. Threat clarifies values, the island shared, and my people have clarified theirs. The presence across the water pressed again, louder this time, dressed in the language of history. You were always part of us. This is unfinished business. This will be resolved. The words fell into the sea and sank. Taiwan did not argue with them. I do not belong to the past, she replied calmly. I belong to those who live on me now. Lin felt this truth resonate deeply, not defiant, not aggressive, simply rooted. The island remembered another lesson learned through centuries of being spoken over. That legitimacy grows from participation, not proclamation. The dream slowed. The sky softened from tension gray to dawn blue. The presence across the water did not disappear, but it paused. Taiwan had not yielded. She had endured, again, not through force, but through continuity. Before Lin woke, the island offered one more feeling, steady and warm. I am not waiting to be saved. I am choosing to remain. Morning arrived. Birds called. Streets stirred. Ordinary life resumed its quiet bravery. And beneath it all, Taiwan continued to listen, not for permission, not for approval, but for balance. The story did not close. It held its breath and waited, awake. Part 7. Sleep returned like a careful visitor. It did not rush Lin this time. It waited at the edge, respectful, until waking loosened its hold. When the dream opened, it opened in daylight. Taiwan was awake, not alert, not tense, simply awake, the way someone is when they have already accepted uncertainty as a companion. Lin stood in the middle of the city now. Buildings rose around them, glass and concrete, reflecting sky and movement. Screens glowed with news, numbers, words repeated too often. Across them all ran an undercurrent, not panic, but awareness. The island felt it too. Living under threat teaches a particular kind of clarity Taiwan conveyed. You learn what matters because you cannot afford confusion. The dream widened. Lin saw ships moving in patterns that were meant to be noticed. Aircraft tracing lines in the sky, not attacking, only reminding. Reminding whom? The people already knew. They had known for years. Threats lose power when they become familiar, Taiwan reflected, but familiarity must never become numbness. The island remembered how the language of force had slowly crept closer to daily life, how phrases like exercise, warning, red line had entered ordinary conversation. Still, cafes opened each morning. Still, trains ran on time. Still, elections were held, arguments debated, jokes made. This is not denial, the island told Lin. This is insistence. Insistence on living. The presence across the water grew restless again. It could not understand this refusal to dramatize. This calm continuation felt like defiance without theater. They expect fear, Taiwan said softly. Fear is loud. I am quiet. The dream shifted not outward, but downward into the roots of the island. Lin felt the mountains again, ancient and immovable, felt the tectonic plates beneath them, pressure existing without explosion. I was born from collision, Taiwan reminded. I understand tension. The island had learned that stability did not mean stillness. It meant adaptation without collapse. The dream showed moments from recent history, alliances discussed carefully, support offered in measured ways, promises spoken with diplomatic caution. The world watched, some loudly, some silently, some only when it was convenient. Taiwan noticed all of it. I do not mistake attention for protection. She conveyed, I protect myself by knowing who I am. Lin felt the strength in that, not isolation, not bravado, but self-recognition. The pressure from across the sea pulsed again, a test, a probe. Taiwan did not answer immediately. She waited. Waiting was something she had mastered, not passive waiting, but attentive waiting. I choose when to respond, she said calmly, not when I am provoked. The dream softened. Dawn approached again, not as an ending, but as a continuation. Before the dream released Lin, Taiwan shared one more truth, quiet and unshakable. History is watching me, but I am watching myself. Lin woke as the first light touched the city. Another day began. The island remained. Listening. Part 8. This time, the dream began with breathing. Not Lin's. The island's. Slow, measured, unmistakably present. Lin found himself standing at the edge of a long table that stretched farther than sight. Upon it lay documents, maps, statements, layers upon layers of intention. None of them belonged to Taiwan. They were about her. Words like stability, reunification, historic mission hovered in the air, heavy with repetition. Each time they were spoken, they tried to settle like dust. Taiwan did not brush them away. She let them fall. Language is a tool, she conveyed calmly. It reveals more about the speaker than the subject. Across the table, The presence in the west had taken on clearer form. Not a face, but a posture. Upright, certain, unyielding. It leaned forward. Time, it insisted, was on its side. Taiwan leaned back. Time belongs to no one, she replied gently. It passes through us all. Lin felt the quiet strength in that response. Not denial, not defiance, perspective. The dream shifted again away from halls of power toward ordinary places. A night market, alive with movement, steam rising from food stalls, conversations overlapping in different tones and languages, laughter threading its way through the noise. Here, history was not argued. It was lived. This is what cannot be occupied. Taiwan shared. The everyday. Lin watched a young couple argue playfully over what to eat. An elderly man folded paper carefully, methodically. A child ran ahead, certain the future would wait. None of them were thinking about borders. And yet, they were the border. My strength is not abstract, the island said softly. It is human. The pressure returned, not with force, but with impatience. Deadlines were suggested, timelines implied, consequences hinted at without being named. Taiwan listened without interruption. She had learned long ago that interruption often feeds escalation. When she finally responded, it was not to the threat, but to herself. I will not be rushed into becoming something I am not. The dream slowed, thickened, like time passing underwater. Lin felt the island's history layering itself. Indigenous roots deep and quiet. Colonial imprint still visible. Modern identity consciously shaped. Nothing erased. Nothing denied. I am continuity, Taiwan conveyed. Not conquest. The presence across the water recoiled slightly, not in fear, but in confusion. It had expected resistance or submission. It found neither. Before the dream loosened its hold, Taiwan offered Lin a final, steady truth, neither comforting nor alarming, simply real. Pressure does not determine outcome. Choices do. Morning arrived again, soft and unannounced. The world continued. The island breathed, and the story, patient and unfinished, remained exactly where it needed to be. Part 9. The dream returned thinner this time, like a veil rather than a curtain. Lin was aware of sleeping and waking at once, suspended in a gentle in-between where Taiwan often chose to speak. The island did not show images immediately. She waited. Waiting, Lin had learned, was never empty with Taiwan. It was listening in its purest form. Then, slowly, sound emerged. Not voices, footsteps, many of them. Not marching, walking. Lin found themselves on a long road that crossed the island from north to south. Along it moved generations, elders with careful steps, adults carrying weight while complaint, young people walking lightly but with intention. They did not all agree with one another. Some argued as they walked. Some were silent. Some laughed too loudly. Yet they moved in the same direction. This is what frightens those who want certainty. Taiwan conveyed. Plurality that does not collapse. The pressure from across the water returned again, but it felt different now. Less confident. More insistent. Statements repeated louder, closer together, as if volume could substitute inevitability. Taiwan remained unhurried. Urgency is often a sign of doubt, she reflected. Lin felt the island's long memories stir, not to retreat into the past, but to ground the present. She remembered moments when others had believed time would erase her will, when patience was mistaken for weakness, when quiet was misread as absence. Each time the prediction failed. "I do not resist time," Taiwan said softly. "I grow within it." The dream shifted to the straight again. The water was restless now, currents overlapping in complex patterns. No clear line divided one side from the other. Only movement, interaction, tension held in motion. This is the truth they struggle with, the island conveyed. There is no clean separation, only relationship. Lin sensed the danger in misunderstanding that truth, mistaking relationship for ownership, proximity for entitlement. Across the water, the presence pressed once more, testing edges, watching reactions. Taiwan did not react outwardly. Instead, she turned inward. She listened to her people, to debates that stretched late into the night, to doubts spoken honestly, to resolve that did not require unanimity. Consensus is not silence, she reminded Lin. It is effort. The dream slowed again, as if the island were conserving energy. Before releasing Lin, Taiwan shared something quieter than a declaration, steadier than reassurance. "I will not decide my future in fear, nor will I abandon it in comfort." Lin woke before dawn. The city outside was dim, half asleep. Somewhere a train moved. Somewhere else a light switched on. Another ordinary morning. Another deliberate day. The island remained awake, listening, becoming. And the story continued unbroken, exactly as it must. Part 10. The dream returned colder, not frightening, colder like air before something breaks. Lin stood on the western shore, where Taiwan watches the horizon most carefully. The sea was calm, too calm, stretched flat like glass holding its breath. Then shapes appeared. At first, they looked like clouds that had forgotten how to move. Long, low, gray. They hovered just above the line where sea meets sky. Ghost ships. Their hulls were half visible, half erased, as if they did not fully belong to the present. No flags flew. No lights blinked. They made no sound, yet their silence pressed heavily against the shore. Lin felt the island tense, not in fear, but in recognition. "I have seen these before," Taiwan conveyed. The ships did not advance. They did not retreat. They waited. Their outlines shimmered, phasing in and out, sometimes sharp, sometimes translucent, like threats that refuse to declare themselves openly. "These are not vessels," Taiwan said softly. "They are intentions." Each ship carried echoes rather than people, old proclamations, repeated promises, warnings recycled, so often they had lost their original meaning. The sea around them darkened slightly, currents tightening as if unsure which future to flow toward. Lin watched as villagers gathered along the coast, not screaming, not fleeing, just watching. Some pointed, some whispered, some said nothing at all. They had learned this language. Visibility without action, Taiwan explained. Presence without engagement. The ghost ships were not there to attack. They were there to be seen, to remind, to loom, to haunt possibility. Fear is more efficient when it does not act, the island reflected. It allows imagination to do the work. One of the ships flickered brighter than the others. For a moment, Lin thought it might solidify, turn real, decisive. Instead, it stalled. Taiwan did not respond outwardly. She did not summon storms. She did not raise walls. She did not shout across the water. She did something far older. She grounded herself. The mountains pressed deeper into the earth. The cities hummed with ordinary noise. Lights came on in kitchens. Screens glowed. Conversations continued. Ghosts feed on attention. Taiwan said calmly, I feed my living. The ships seemed unsettled by this. They drifted slightly closer, then stopped again, as if restrained by something invisible. The sea itself. The strait thickened, not with waves, but with resistance, memory, law, consequence, choice. You cannot haunt what acknowledges you without surrendering to you, the island conveyed. Lin felt the truth of it settle heavily, but steadily. The ships were powerful only because they were undefined. Neither war nor peace. Neither absence nor arrival. Just threat suspended. Night deepened. Moonlight cut through the mist, and the ghost ships began to blur at the edges. Not disappearing, never disappearing, but losing sharpness, definition. They would return. Taiwan knew this. Hauntings repeat, she told Lin, until the living stop mistaking them for destiny. Before the dream releases hold, Taiwan offered one final, quiet certainty. I am not afraid of ghosts. I am afraid only of forgetting myself. Lin woke as waves touched the shore below, gentle and rhythmic. The horizon was empty. For now, the island remained, listening, rooted, awake, and the ghost ships waited, just beyond certainty, unable to decide whether they were real enough to arrive. Part 11. The next night, the sea did not wait. Lin found themselves already surrounded. The horizon was no longer a line. It was a ring. Ghost ships encircled the island in a wide, deliberate arc, spaced evenly, as if placed by an unseen hand that valued symmetry. They floated without wake, without anchor, without sound. Some were close enough now that their shadows bled into the water, darkening it unnaturally. They did not move as ships should. They hovered. Their forms were wrong in subtle ways. Hulls too smooth, decks too empty, structures repeating like copied memories rather than engineered realities. From a distance, they seemed solid. Up close, they flickered, their edges dissolving into mist before returning again. They're learning my shape, Taiwan conveyed quietly. By circling me. Lin felt the pressure everywhere now, not focused, but constant, like a hand resting on the island's chest. Not pushing yet, just reminding her that it could. The ships formed layers. Closer ones loomed low and heavy. Farther ones faded into the haze, barely visible, more suggestion than presence. This is how hauntings work, Taiwan explained. They surround before they act. They replace horizon with inevitability. The sea beneath them felt trapped, currents forced into unfamiliar paths, fish scattering, tides hesitating as if unsure which direction was still allowed. The ghost ships whispered without sound. Their whispers were ideas. You are enclosed. You are alone. There is no way out that does not pass through us. Lin felt a flicker of unease, not panic, but the strain of being watched from all directions. Taiwan felt it too. She remained still. Encirclement is a performance. She said calmly, "It only works if I forget my depth." She turned inward again, into herself, into mountains that rose long before any ship had been imagined, into fault lines that understood pressure better than any fleet, into people who had lived for decades under the awareness of proximity. Without collapse, lights appeared across the island. Cities did not dim. They brightened. From above, Taiwan glowed, not defiantly, but steadily. Homes, streets, harbors, schools, hospitals, each light an assertion of presence. You cannot surround what exists in layers. The island conveyed. The ghost ships reacted, not dramatically. They drifted closer, tightening the ring, narrow in the visible sea. The illusion of confinement deepened. Some ships flickered faster now, their forms struggling to remain coherent as the proximity strained their unreality. "They want me to respond as an island," Taiwan told Lin. "But I respond as society." The people did not gather in fear. They gathered in routine. Night markets opened. Trains ran. Screens lit up with arguments, jokes, plans for tomorrow. Children slept. Elders remembered. The ships circled, waiting for silence that did not come, waiting for darkness that never fully arrived. The sea itself began to resist, not violently, but stubbornly. Currents pushed against the hovering hulls, causing subtle distortions, like reflections refusing to align. Ghosts, Lin realized, required stillness to remain convincing. Taiwan refused stillness. Before the dream loosened its hold, the island shared a truth heavier than any warning, calmer than any reassurance. Encirclement is not possession, and haunting is not fate. Lin woke with the sensation of being held, not trapped, but contained by something solid and alive. Outside, the sea rolled gently. The horizon was wide again. But the memory of the circle remained, not as fear, but as awareness. The ships would return. They always did. And the island would remain, lit, layered, unhaunted by what could not truly touch her. Part 12. That night, the dream did not open. It closed. Lin became aware of darkness not as absence, but as pressure, thick, compressing, deliberate. The sea could no longer be heard. Even the island's breath was muted, as if something vast had leaned too close. When vision returned, it was dim. The ghost ships were no longer on the horizon. They were everywhere. They pressed inward, closer than before, their forms darker, heavier, less translucent. Whatever kept them half unreal was thinning. Hulls creaked without sound. Decks were no longer empty. Shadows moved where people should have been. Figures stood there, not soldiers, not sailors. Reflections, distorted silhouettes made of borrowed authority and repeated history. Their faces shifted constantly, never settling, as if certainty itself refused to inhabit them. They are trying to become real. Taiwan conveyed, her voice slower now, deeper. Ghosts envy wait. The sea beneath the ships was no longer water. It had turned black, thick like ink spilled too deliberately to be accidental. Currents twisted into knots, trapped in loops that led nowhere. The circle tightened, so close now that Lin could see details that should not exist. Numbers etched into metal, symbols repeated obsessively, phrases carved so deeply into holes that they seemed wounds. Inevitable, historical, final. Each word pulsed faintly, feeding the darkness. The ships began to hum. A low frequency, not audible but felt, vibrating through bone, through memory, through doubt. This is the true weapon, Taiwan said quietly. Not force, fatigue. The island felt heavy now. Not weak, burdened. Every light on her surface flickered. Some went out, not because they were destroyed, but because people hesitated. Because imagination briefly betrayed courage. This is how hauntings succeed, Taiwan shared. They convince the living to rehearse their own disappearance. The ships drew closer still. Their shadows crawl up the coastline, staining sand, concrete, stone. The waterline vanished beneath them. The sea no longer separated. It suffocated. Lin felt fear then. Real fear. Not panic. Something colder. The fear of erasure disguised as order. The ghost ships whispered louder now. No longer suggestions. Certainties. You will be absorbed. Resistance prolongs suffering. Silence is peace. Taiwan trembled. For the first time. The mountains held, but they felt the strain. Fault lines tightened. Old scars ached. This is the edge, the island admitted, where endurance alone is not enough. And yet, she did not break. Instead, she did something dangerous. She remembered aloud, not selectively, not heroically. She remembered mistakes, complicity, fear, silence. She remembered every moment she had nearly vanished. The darkness recoiled. Ghosts cannot survive full memory. Taiwan said, steadier now. They require amnesia. The lights returned, unevenly, imperfectly, but real, not all at once. One by one, homes, screens, streets, voices. The ships screamed without sound. Their hulls cracked, not physically, but conceptually. Words peeled away from metal like dead skin. The figures on deck blurred, stretched, collapsed back into mist. The circle loosened, not broken, but strained. Before the dream released Lin, Taiwan spoke one final truth. Darker than comfort, stronger than hope. This will not end cleanly, but neither will I. Lin woke with heart heavy, breath slow. Outside, the sea was calm, too calm, and far out, where night still clung to the horizon, something lingered, not yet gone, not yet real, waiting for doubt to return. Part 13. The dream no longer pretended to be a dream. Lin did not enter it. It closed around them. There was no horizon now, no sky, only a vast, choking gray where sea and air had fused into something heavy and hostile. Taiwan lay beneath it like a body pinned, under a weight too large to name. The ghost ships had multiplied. They were no longer a ring. They were a mass. Layer upon layer of vessels drifted around the island, some so close that their shadows merged with the coastline itself. Others hovered farther out, barely visible. Their presence felt more than seen, like thoughts that refused to leave. They blocked the moon. They blocked the stars. They blocked time. Their hulls were no longer translucent. They had thickened, darkened, grown substance. As if the longer they lingered, the more reality they stole from the world around them. They are feeding, Taiwan conveyed, her voice lower now, strained but controlled, not on land, on hesitation. The ships were wrong in ways that made the mind ache. Some were impossibly long, stretching beyond perspective. Some folded back into themselves, looping like broken memories. Some appeared duplicated. The same ship repeated again and again, slightly altered each time, a lie rehearsed until it sounded like truth. Their decks were crowded now. Figures stood shoulder to shoulder, unmoving, facing the island. Their faces were blank, smooth, erased, authority without accountability. From deep within the mass came a sound, not a siren, not an engine, a chant, slow, monotonous, endless, not words, assertions. That Taiwan had always been theirs. That resistance was temporary. That absorption was mercy. The sea beneath them had turned viscous, sluggish, dragging itself in slow, reluctant motions. Waves rose but collapsed before reaching shore, exhausted. The island felt smaller. Not physically, psychologically. Encirclement shrinks the imagination first, Taiwan whispered. Then the body. The ghost ships began to move. Not forward, sideways. They slid along the island's perimeter, tightening gaps, erasing exits, aligning themselves with terrifying precision. Wherever there was space, they filled it. Wherever there was light, they dimmed it. Ports closed, not by force, but by fear of what waited beyond them. Signals flickered. Routes vanished from maps. The ships projected images onto the fog. False futures. Order without choice. Peace without voice. Safety bought with disappearance. This is how hauntings evolve. Taiwan said, her tone darker now. They stop threatening destruction and start offering relief. Lin felt the pull of it, the exhaustion, the temptation to let the pressure decide. Even the mountains groan now, not cracking, resisting. The ships press closer still, their hulls scraping against each other without sound, building a wall of dark metal and memory. No storm rose. No savior arrived. Only the ships and the island. They wanted to answer as land. Taiwan said slowly, so they can take me. She paused, then corrected herself. I will answer as memory. She released everything at once. Not light, not force. Stories. Every suppressed voice. Every argument held in kitchens. Every vote cast under pressure. Every mistake acknowledged. Every choice made anyway. The ghost ships recoiled violently now, their forms distorted, stretched, bent under the weight of specificity. Generalizations cracked. Certainty fractured. Some ships began to rot in place, metal peeling away to reveal nothing underneath. Others screamed silently, their decks emptying as figures dissolved into fog. But many remained. Too many. They regrouped, darker than before. They will keep coming, Taiwan said. No illusion left now, because ghosts do not fear death. They fear irrelevance. The sea convulsed. Not into a storm, into paralysis. Everything hung suspended. Before the dream collapsed entirely, Taiwan spoke one last line to Lin. Not comforting, not heroic, but brutally honest. This is what it means to exist beside a power that refuses your reality. You do not defeat it. You survive it. Lin woke gasping. The room was dark. The silence felt watched. And far beyond sight, far beyond sleep, the ghost ships drifted still, endless, patient, waiting for the moment when the island might finally grow too tired to remember herself. But she had not yet, and that, for now, was enough. Part 14. The darkness learned. It adapted. When Lin returned to the dream, there was no sea at all, only ships. An ocean made of hulls and shadow, layered so densely that water had become irrelevant. The ghost fleet pressed in from every direction, stacked horizon upon horizon, a sky of iron hanging low over the island. Taiwan could no longer see the edge of herself. The ships had begun to overlap. Some passed through others, as if reality were negotiable. Others fused together, metal sinking into metal, forming vast, cathedral-like masses that drifted slowly, reverently, as if performing a ritual older than violence. Their movement was patient, predatory. They are no longer waiting for weakness, Taiwan conveyed, her voice thin but unbroken. They are manufacturing it. From the ships poured fog, not mist, but something heavier, crawling inland, seeping into streets, rooms, lungs. It did not choke. It dulled. Memories softened at the edges. Words lost urgency. Time stretched, slackened. This is a true siege, Taiwan whispered, not starvation. Forgetting. The lights across the island dimmed again. This time, fewer returned. Not because they were destroyed, but because people hesitated longer before turning them on. Because exhaustion had found its mark. Because the ghost ships had learned that pressure applied endlessly eventually feels like gravity. The fleet began to speak with one voice. Not loud. Close. You are tired. You have endured enough. Let us carry the weight. The ships projected calm now. No threats. No warnings. Only inevitability polished into reassurance. Lin saw the effect immediately. Conversations shortened. Debates softened. Choices postponed. When fear fails, Taiwan said quietly, they offer rest. The ghost ships moved closer still, their shadows now stitched into the island's surface. Streets darkened where they passed overhead. The coastline lost its shape, becoming a smear between presence and absence. The ships were anchored now, not to the sea, to doubt. Some ships bore new markings, faint, shifting symbols that looked disturbingly like agreements. Compromises drawn before consent. Futures drafted without signatures. This is occupation rehearsed as kindness, Taiwan conveyed. The mountains shuddered, not collapsing, aging. Time weighed differently now. Each second dragged, heavy and thick. Progress slowed to a crawl. Hope became something that required effort to recall. The fleet tightened. No gaps remained. No horizon. Only proximity. Lynn felt the island's strain reach something critical. Not fear. Loneliness. To be surrounded is not the worst thing, Taiwan admitted, her voice almost swallowed. To be unheard is. For a moment, just a moment, the island wavered. The ghost ship surged. They leaned in, hulls grinding silently, shadows swallowing the last unclaimed spaces. This was the moment hauntings waited for. Not collapse. Consent. Taiwan closed her eyes and did something terrifying. She stopped explaining herself. No appeals. No declarations. No resistance performed for witnesses. She withdrew inward, not surrendering, but condensing. If I must disappear, she said to Lynn, I will disappear intact. The ships recoiled slightly, confused. They needed her to respond. They needed her visible. Ghosts require an audience. The darkness thickened, furious now. The fleet pressed closer, desperate to provoke, to extract acknowledgement, to force reaction. But Taiwan remained still, not gone, unreadable, before the dream shattered. Taiwan offered Lin one last truth, the darkest yet. They cannot destroy me, but they can wait longer than hope. Lin woke shaking. The night felt heavier than before, as if something vast hovered just beyond walls and windows. Somewhere far away, or perhaps very near, metal shifted without sound. The ghost ships had not left. They had settled in, and the island, silent, compressed, listening, endured not as defiance, not as victory, but as the most fragile, dangerous thing of all, persistence without witnesses. Part 14. The darkness learned. It adapted. When Lin returned to the dream, there was no sea at all, only ships, an ocean made of hulls and shadow, layered so densely that water had become irrelevant. The ghost fleet pressed in from every direction, stacked horizon upon horizon, a sky of iron hanging low over the island. Taiwan could no longer see the edge of herself. The ships had begun to overlap. Some passed through others, as if reality were negotiable. Others fused together, metal sinking into metal, forming vast, cathedral-like masses that drifted slowly, reverently, as if performing a ritual older than violence. Their movement was patient, predatory. They are no longer waiting for weakness, Taiwan conveyed, her voice thin but unbroken. They are manufacturing it. From the ships poured fog, not mist, but something heavier, crawling inland, seeping into streets, rooms, lungs. It did not choke. It dulled. Memories softened at the edges. Words lost urgency. Time stretched, slackened. This is a true siege, Taiwan whispered, not starvation. Forgetting. The lights across the island dimmed again. This time, fewer returned. Not because they were destroyed, but because people hesitated longer before turning them on. Because exhaustion had found its mark. Because the ghost ships had learned that pressure applied endlessly eventually feels like gravity. The fleet began to speak with one voice. Not loud. Close. You are tired. You have endured enough. Let us carry the weight. The ship's projected calm now. No threats. No warnings. Only inevitability polished into reassurance. Lynn saw the effect immediately. Conversations shortened. Debates softened. Choices postponed. When fear fails, Taiwan said quietly, they offer rest. The ghost ships moved closer still, their shadows now stitched into the island's surface. Streets darkened where they passed overhead. The coastline lost its shape, becoming a smear between presence and absence. The ships were anchored now, not to the sea, to doubt. Some ships bore new markings, faint, shifting symbols that looked disturbingly like agreements. Compromises drawn before consent. Futures drafted without signatures. This is occupation rehearsed as kindness. Taiwan conveyed. The mountains shuddered, not collapsing, aging. Time weighed differently now. Each second dragged, heavy and thick. Progress slowed to a crawl. Hope became something that required effort to recall. The fleet tightened. No gaps remained. No horizon. Only proximity. Lynn felt the island's strain reach something critical. Not fear. Loneliness. To be surrounded is not the worst thing, Taiwan admitted, her voice almost swallowed. To be unheard is. For a moment, just a moment, the island wavered. The ghost ship surged. They leaned in, hulls grinding silently, shadows swallowing the last unclaimed spaces. This was the moment hauntings waited for. Not collapse. Consent. Taiwan closed her eyes and did something terrifying. She stopped explaining herself. No appeals, no declarations, no resistance performed for witnesses. She withdrew inward, not surrendering, but condensing. If I must disappear, she said to Lynn, I will disappear intact. The ships recoiled slightly, confused. They needed her to respond. They needed her visible. Ghosts require an audience. The darkness thickened, furious now. The fleet pressed closer, desperate to provoke, to extract acknowledgement, to force reaction. But Taiwan remained still, not gone, unreadable, before the dream shattered. Taiwan offered Lin one last truth, the darkest yet. They cannot destroy me, but they can wait longer than hope. Lin woke shaking. The night felt heavier than before, as if something vast hovered just beyond walls and windows. Somewhere far away, or perhaps very near, metal shifted without sound. The ghost ships had not left. They had settled in, and the island, silent, compressed, listening, endured not as defiance, not as victory, but as the most fragile, dangerous thing of all, persistence without witnesses. Part 15. Lin returned to the dream and found the island quieter than silence. Not calm, sedated. The ghost ships had stopped circling like predators. They had begun to drift in slow, ceremonial patterns, as if the siege had become religion. They moved with the patience of things that did not need to hurry, because time itself had already been bent in their favor. Above them, the sky looked bruised, purple-black, heavy, close. And beneath them, the sea was no longer sea. It was a mirror made of oil. In it, Taiwan's reflection did not look like Taiwan. It looked like a version of the island with its lights rearranged, roads leading nowhere, ports sealed, cities dimmed into obedience. A future rehearsed until it felt familiar. The ghost ships did not speak in threats anymore. They spoke in lullabies, a low vibration that slid into mine like warm water, softening edges, rounding sharp thoughts into harmless shapes. Lynn felt it working. A tiredness that did not belong to sleep, a desire not to escape, but to stop resisting the feeling of being watched. Taiwan felt it too. They are trying to turn my waking into dreaming, she conveyed, faint as a heartbeat under blankets, to make unreality feel normal. The ships tightened their formation again, but subtly, like a noose pulled slowly so the body adjusts before understands. A few of them came closer than any should dare. Their hulls scraped nothing, and yet made the air taste of metal. Their decks were crowded with those faceless silhouettes again, more detailed now, as if the ships were learning how to sculpt authority out of fog. Some figures carried lanterns, but the lanterns did not cast light. They cast forgetting. Wherever their glow touched, details blurred, names, dates, small acts of courage, all softened until they felt like dreams Lynn might have invented. Lynn watched the street sign dissolve into blankness. A poster on a wall lose its words. A memory of a voice, someone's voice, fade until only the shape of speaking remained. Taiwan shuddered, not from fear, from rage held too long. They are not trying to take my land first, she said, voice darker now. They are trying to take my story. One ship, larger than the others, drifted forward. Its bow pointed at the island like a finger accusing the shore. Along its side, old carved words returned, deeper, sharper, pulsing like infected wounds. Inevitable, historical, final. This ship did not hum like the rest. It whispered right into Lynn's ear, though the air between them was thick and dead. You are tired. You are small. You will be relieved when it ends. Lynn's stomach turned, not from fear, but from the intimacy of it. The whisper wasn't meant to be heard by crowds. It was meant to be heard by the exhausted, alone, at night. Taiwan's mountains groaned again. This time, Lynn realized the sound wasn't geological. It was human. On the island below, people moved slower, not because they were forced, because they were drained. A fatigue that made everything feel pointless. A fog that made every decision feel too heavy to carry. The ghost ships were learning a cruel truth. You don't have to break people. You only have to outlast their meaning. Taiwan drew a breath. It sounded like stone scraping against stone, deep, old, dangerous. No, she conveyed, and this time the word had weight. The island did not light up. Not yet. Instead, she did something stranger. She began to sing, not with sound, with rhythm, a pulse through the ground, steady, ancient, unmistakable. It traveled through streets, under doorways, through ribs. It reminded bodies of something minds were being trained to forget. You are here. You are awake. You are real. The ghost ships twitched. Some flickered. Some drifted off pattern for a moment, as if the song disrupted the spell that held them in formation. But the largest ship pushed forward anyway, stubborn, hungry. The faceless figures lifted their lanterns higher. Forgetfulness spread faster. Taiwan's pulse strengthened. A second rhythm joined it, quicker, sharper. Then a third. Not unity, plurality. Many pulses at once, overlapping but not collapsing into one. The ghost ships hated that. Because hauntings work best when they can convince you there is only one ending. The fleet began to tremble, not retreating, not attacking, vibrating, like a pressure cooker that had been forced to hold too much unreality. Taiwan spoke to Lin again, low and brutal. They can surround my coastline, but they cannot surround every heartbeat at once. And then the dream blackened, sudden, total, like someone had extinguished the world with a wet hand. In the last fraction before waking, Lin saw it. The ghost ships were no longer simply waiting. They were preparing to do what ghosts do when the living refuse to forget. They were preparing to get angry. Part 16. Anger changed the ships. Not explosively. Methodically. Lin felt it before seeing it. A shift in pressure, like a room where oxygen has been quietly removed. The fleet no longer drifted. It aligned. Every vessel corrected itself into rigid geometry, angles too precise to be natural, distances measured to the same cold standard. The lullaby stopped. So did the whispers. Silence fell. The kind that arrives when someone has decided it no longer needs persuasion. The ghost ships began to anchor, not to the sea. The sea had long since surrendered its authority, but to invisible points in space, locking themselves into place as if reality itself had been nailed shut. The ring hardened into a wall. No drift, no flicker. They were no longer haunting. They were asserting. Taiwan felt it like a weight pressing directly onto her spine. The mountains bent just slightly, enough to be felt, enough to remind. This is a phase where ghosts punish resistance, she conveyed, voice steady but stripped of softness. When they realize they cannot be loved, the ships opened. Not doors, not hatches. They opened voids. Sections of hull peeled back to reveal nothing inside. No engines, no crews, only depthless dark that drank light without reflection. From these openings poured waves of distortion that rolled toward the island like weather that had learned intent. Where the waves touched land, things did not break. They misaligned. A street corner shifted a meter to the left. A building's windows reflected a sky that no longer existed. A clock tower rang an hour that belonged in no time zone. Reality began to stutter. They are not attacking bodies, Taiwan said. They are attacking continuity. Lin saw it clearly now. The ships were trying to fracture the idea of now, to make past, present, and future blur until choice lost its meaning. On the decks, the faceless figures moved for the first time. They raised their arms in unison, and the island felt it. A command not spoken but imposed. Stand down. Align. Accept. Some lights went out. Not many, but enough. Not because people agreed, but because coordination faltered. Because fatigue finally clipped a few crucial threads. The fleet responded immediately. A ship detached from the wall and slid forward, closer than any had dared before. Its shadow crawled inland like a spreading bruise. This one was different. It bore no words, no symbols, only mirrors. Polished surfaces lined its hull, reflecting the island back at herself, but always slightly altered. Streets straighter, crowds quieter, descent smoothed away. A version of Taiwan without friction. This is the most dangerous lie, Taiwan whispered. The promise of peace without tension. The mirrored ship pulsed. The reflected version of the island began to feel tempting. Lin felt it too, the relief of an ending, even a false one. The exhaustion of holding complexity when something simple was being offered. Taiwan felt the pull and recoiled. Not outwardly, inwardly. She retreated again, deeper than before, past memory, past story, past even identity, into something raw and ancient. If they erase my future, she said, I will become my foundation. The ground beneath the island answered, not with earthquakes, with refusal. The distortion waves buckled. Buildings realigned themselves violently. Clocks shattered. Reflections cracked. The mirrored ship screamed without sound as its surface fractured, unable to hold a reality that rejected simplification. The fleet reacted. Together, they surged inward, no longer pretending restraint. The wall began to close. The island was being compressed. Coastline collapsing inward by degrees too small to measure, but too large to ignore. This was no longer a haunting. It was a crush. Before the dream tore itself apart, Taiwan spoke to Lin one last time. Her voice stripped to something almost feral. They think anger means escalation. They have forgotten what survival looks like. The world went black. Not gently. Violently. Lin woke with a cry caught in the throat, heart hammering, hands numb. Outside, the night was unnaturally still. No wind, no waves, and far beyond sight, closer now than ever, something vast had committed itself to the idea that patience was no longer enough. Part 17. The line was crossed without ceremony. No alarm sounded. No declaration was made. The ghost ship simply began to move inward, all at once, slow and inexorable, like a tide that had decided gravity was optional. Lin felt the compression immediately. The island did not scream. It compressed, drawing itself tighter, as if bracing for something that could no longer be avoided. The sea vanished completely, not drained, not displaced, erased where water had been. There was now a dark, viscous nothing that supported the ships without question. They no longer floated. They hovered by permission, held up by an authority that did not require physics. The voids in their hulls widened. From them poured shapes that were not smoke, not shadow, revisions, pieces of reality rewritten as they touched land. A harbor became a diagram. A park flattened into a grid. A street lost its name and became a number. They're overriding me, Taiwan conveyed, her voice low, almost swallowed, replacing presence with plan. The faceless figures poured from the ships now, stepping onto nothing and finding it solid beneath them. They walked inland without urgency, without sound, leaving behind zones of stillness where nothing argued back. In those zones, conversations ended mid-sentence. Arguments dissolved. Choices stalled. People did not fall. They paused, as if waiting for permission to continue existing. The fleet closed tighter. Distances shrank unnaturally. The coastline folded inward, not physically, but conceptually, the idea of edge becoming meaningless. This is annexation without a rival, Taiwan whispered. Occupation without invasion. Lin saw something worse. The ships had begun to synchronize with the island's own rhythms, matching her pulses, mimicking her breath, learning how to predict her responses before she made them. They want to preempt me, she said, to answer for me. One ship reached the shore. It did not dock. It overlapped, its hull phased halfway into land, metal and stone occupying the same space without conflict, a violation so complete it felt polite. Where the overlap occurred, the ground lost its memory. Old paths vanished. Sacred places flattened into function. Names were replaced with descriptors. Taiwan recoiled, sharply this time. The ground fractured, not with earthquakes, but with refusal. The overlapping ship juddered, its form destabilizing, hull glitching between states. But the others compensated instantly. They tightened the ring. Pressure surged. For the first time, Taiwan felt something crack. Not mountains, not cities. Trust. A single thread snapped somewhere deep. The belief that listening alone could hold a line. I cannot outlisten annihilation, she admitted, voice raw. I can only decide what survives it. The ghost ships responded, as if they had been waiting for that admission. They advanced faster. The void thickened. The sky darkened to near black. From the largest ship, the one without words, without mirrors, something emerged. Not a figure, a concept, a gravity so absolute it bent intention toward it. A presence that did not threaten or persuade. It assumed compliance, assumed erasure, assumed inevitability. Lin struggled to breathe. The island struggled to remain herself. This was the moment hauntings dreamed of, when the living, exhausted, begin to believe the ghosts were always meant to be there. Taiwan gathered herself one last time, not outward, not inward, but across. She reached not for unity, not for consensus, not for heroism. She reached for continuity. I will not win, she said to Lin, stripped of illusion, but I will not vanish in their language. She began to fracture herself deliberately, not breaking, dividing. Stories detached from geography. Values slipped free of borders. Memory unmoored from maps. The ghost ships faltered, just for a moment, because you cannot surround what has learned how to exist without a single center. But the fleet did not retreat. They adapted, again, and in that adaptation, something irreversible took shape, a commitment so total it poisoned every future. The dream collapsed under the weight of it. Lin woke shaking, lungs burning, the sense of being watched unbearable. Outside, dawn refused to arrive. The sky remained dark, and far beyond the edge of sight, closer than ever, the ghost fleet pressed inward, no longer content to haunt, no longer pretending patience. They had decided. Part 18. Transformation did not announce itself. It arrived as damage. Lin felt it first as vertigo, the sense that the island was no longer beneath them but within them, threaded through nerves and breath. Taiwan was changing shape, not physically, but existentially. The kind of change that cannot be reversed because it happens at the level of meaning. The ghost fleet tightened again. Not faster, not louder, closer. The void between ships and shore thinned to a membrane, translucent and trembling. Through it, the ships pressed their influence directly into the island's core. Not crushing now, assimilating. This is a cost of endurance, Taiwan conveyed, voice roughened to something almost human. To survive long enough, you must become something that can survive. The ships responded with precision. They stopped moving. Every vessel locked into a perfect, suffocating stillness, a cathedral of halted intention. In that stillness, the island felt a new pressure, expectation. The ghosts waited, not for surrender, for redefinition. They wanted Taiwan to continue, but only as something emptied of choice, alive but compliant, present but silent, a living monument to inevitability. Lin felt the temptation in it, the terrible mercy of continuing without resistance, existing without pain, being allowed to remain, provided nothing meaningful was insisted upon. The island felt it too. For a moment, longer than any before, Taiwan wavered. I could endure like this, she admitted, almost inaudible. I could last forever, smaller. The fleet leaned in. This was the moment they had engineered. The moment when survival itself begins to feel like surrender's twin. Then Taiwan made a decision that frightened even herself. She stopped protecting her borders, not because she gave up, because borders had become predictable. She let the pressure pass through. The ghost ships reacted too late. The void poured inward and found no center to collapse. The island had already redistributed herself. What had once been concentrated in geography now existed in patterns. Language survived in cadence rather than permission. Memory persisted as habit rather than archive. Choice lived in repetition rather than declaration. The ships began to destabilize. Not violently. Confused. They were built to dominate structures, not behaviors. To occupy places, not rhythms. You cannot overwrite what does not present itself for overwriting. Taiwan said, steadier now, darker, harder. The fleet attempted to adjust. They projected new frameworks, new normalities, new instructions. But the island no longer answered where expected. Resistance did not appear as defiance. It appeared as misalignment. The ships issued commands. The island responded with delay, with variation, with imperfect echoes. Enough to keep existing, not enough to be owned. Fury rippled through the fleet, cold, surgical fury. Several ships broke formation and surged forward, abandoning symmetry. Their hulls distorted, tearing themselves into sharper, uglier shapes. They were no longer pretending inevitability. They wanted control. The sea, long erased, spasmed. A ripple of remembered water surged upward, crashing into the nearest vessels. Not a wave, a refusal shaped like motion. The ships reeled. Some cracked open. spilling concepts too rigid to survive contact with living complexity. They collapsed inward, folding into themselves like bad ideas exposed to daylight. But others held. Too many. The sky split. Not lightning, fracture. A seam open overhead, revealing nothing behind it. Just depth. Endless, watching. The largest ship moved. Finally, it advanced without distortion, without hesitation, without theatrics. This was no ghost. This was the thing ghosts served. The island felt the truth land like a verdict. This will not be survived intact. Taiwan gathered what remained of her coherence. Not to repel, not to flee, but to choose what will be lost. If something must break, she told Lin, voice like stone ground to dust, it will be what they came for. The dream shuddered violently. Reality buckled. And somewhere deep inside the island, something ancient prepared to die, deliberately, so that something unnamed might continue. Lin woke with a scream swallowed by air that felt too thin. The room was dark. The world felt wrong. And far beyond sight, the final vessel closed the distance, carrying with it the certainty that the next phase would not be endured. It would be paid for. Part 19. The sacrifice did not look like destruction. It looked like letting go. Lin felt it as a sudden hollowness, as if something vast inside Taiwan had gone quiet, not violently silenced, but released. A truth unfastened from the center and allowed to fall away into darkness. The ghost fleet felt it too. They paused. For the first time since arriving, they hesitated, not because they were repelled, but because something they'd come to seize was no longer where it was supposed to be. Taiwan had given up a certainty. Not land, not people, not memory. She relinquished the idea of being recognized. I will no longer need the world to agree on what I am, she conveyed, voice stripped down to its most dangerous calm. I will exist without permission. The largest vessel advanced. Up close, it was no longer even ship-like. A mass of intention held together by discipline and denial. Its surface did not reflect. It absorbed. It was built to take in complexity and crush it into singular meaning. It pressed against the island, and something went wrong. The vessel expected resistance or collapse. Instead, it encountered incompatibility. Taiwan did not reject it. She did not oppose it. She infected it. The rhythm she had scattered, the habits, the plural pulses, the uncentralized continuities, seeped into the vessel's structure, not dramatically, subtly, like water entering a crack too small to notice until it widens. Commands issued from the vessel began to arrive out of order. Signals echoed back altered. Certainty lost tempo. The ship shuddered, not breaking, desynchronizing. The smaller ghost ships reacted in panic. Formation collapsed. Geometry failed. The perfect wall dissolved into clusters that no longer trusted one another's positions. They had built themselves to dominate something coherent. They had not prepared for something distributed. You can conquer a center, Taiwan said quietly, almost to herself. You cannot conquer a pattern that learns. The fleet tried to pull back. Too late. The contamination spread, not as rebellion, not as explosion, but as ambiguity. Orders became suggestions. Hierarchy blurred. The faceless figures on deck began to flicker wildly, their outlines unable to decide what authority they represented. Some vanished, others remained, but stood uncertain, no longer sure what they were enforcing. The great vessel groaned, not audibly, but conceptually, its hull warped as incompatible meanings toward its structure. For the first time, the fleet felt something like fear, not a defeat, of loss of control. Taiwan felt the cost of her choice settle heavily. She was smaller now, not weaker, diminished. Something precious was gone forever. The hope of being fully understood, of having her existence neatly affirmed by others. That hope would not return. "This is a price," she told Lin, voice steady but hollow. "To remain, I must accept being misread forever." The largest vessel convulsed. Cracks opened across its surface, not spilling fire or smoke, but questions. Doubt poured out, corrosive and unstoppable. The ship began to fold inward, collapsing under the weight of its own rigidity. Around it, the ghost fleet scattered, not retreating, fleeing fragmentation. They drifted away in disarray, their haunting broken, not ended, but spoiled. Whatever they touched now would never be quite obedient again. The sky remained dark. The sea did not return. Taiwan stood, altered, wounded, intact in a way that could never be repaired back to what she had been. Lin felt the final truth settle like ash. This was not victory. This was survival through contamination. The dream began to unravel before it dissolved completely. Taiwan spoke once more, quieter than ever, but unshakable. They will come again. But next time, they will not know what they are touching. Lin woke slowly. The world was still, too still. But somewhere deep beneath exhaustion and loss, something persistent continued. Not bright, not loud, but alive in a way that no fleet could ever fully surround. Part 20. The haunting did not end. It settled. When Lin returned for the last time, there was no dreamscape to enter, no threshold, no veil. The island was simply there, present in the same way scars are present, no longer bleeding, never gone. The ghost ships were gone from the sky, not destroyed, not defeated, absent in the way predators become absent when the hunt has learned to look back. The sea returned slowly, cautiously, as if testing whether it was still allowed to exist. Water reoccupied its place without ceremony. Waves relearned the shoreline. Tides hesitated, then resumed. Taiwan stood changed, smaller in some dimensions, deeper in others. Something essential had been burned away. The need to be legible to power, the hope of a clean ending, the illusion that survival would ever be recognized as moral victory. What remained was harder, quieter, permanent. This is what endures, Taiwan conveyed, not to Lin alone, but to herself. Not resolution, continuation. The ghost fleet lingered nowhere specific now. It existed as memory, as possibility, as a shadow that no longer needed ships to feel real. The threat had diffused into the background of time, not gone, but normalized. This was the darkest truth. Not invasion, not war, living beside inevitability without surrendering to it. Taiwan did not celebrate. She reorganized. Life resumed, not brightly, not optimistically, but deliberately. People moved forward carrying a weight they did not name. Children learned habits before history. Language bent, adapted, survived sideways. Nothing returned to how it had been. Nothing collapsed into what was promised. The island no longer listened in the same way. She listened selectively now, not to pressure, not to insistence, not to ghosts rehearsing certainty. She listened to rhythm, to repetition, to the low signal of continuation that cannot be commanded. Lynn understood, finally, what Taiwan had become, not a symbol, not a warning, not a prize, a condition, difficult to define, impossible to finish, too alive to be concluded. Before the connection faded for good, Taiwan offered Lynn the last thing she would ever give. Not wisdom, not comfort, not hope. A fact, they will always come back, and I will always already be changed. Lynn woke. Morning arrived. Not triumphant, not peaceful, just real, and somewhere beyond sight, not approaching, not retreating. The idea of the ghost ships remained, forever unable to decide whether the island had survived them, or whether she had taught them something they could never unlearn. The story ended there, not because it was finished, but because it would no longer allow itself to be told as a warning, only as presence,